Have you ever dreamed of exploring Sweden, a country where forests, islands, and glassy lakes stretch farther than the eye can see? Many travelers know Stockholm, Gothenburg, and Malmö, but few realize Sweden also hides the Arctic tundra, where the sun never sets. Mountains crowned with glaciers, and an archipelago of over 30,000 islands. The good news is you don't have to piece it all together alone. Today, we'll take you through Sweden's most fascinating places, from silent wilderness to cities built on water. Along the Bohuslän coast, Smögen stretches across a strip of rock and harbor, where the sea presses close against the land. Wooden houses in red, yellow, and white line the long pier, their reflections moving in the water between boats. The air smells of salt and tar, and gulls circle above the masts. The granite cliffs around the town rise smooth and pale, shaped by wind and waves into rounded forms. Narrow channels cut between the rocks, their surfaces glinting in the sun. Fishermen's sheds stand at the edge of the piers, and nets hang drying in the breeze. In summer, the harbor fills with light, footsteps echoing on the wooden boards, voices carried over the water. In the center of Dalarna lies Lake Siljan, a wide circle of water formed by a meteorite impact more than 300 million years ago. Forested ridges rise around it in a ring, their slopes reflecting in the lake's clear surface. From above, the shape is almost perfect, a hollow left by violence, softened by time and water. Villages and farms line the shore, their fields running down to narrow beaches of sand and stone. Church towers stand among birch trees, visible across the water in the long northern light. In summer, the lake glows blue and calm. In winter, it freezes solid, turning into a plain of ice and pale snow. Islands lie scattered near the center, low and wooded. Boats cross between them, their wakes breaking the surface for a moment before it closes again. Far in the north of Sweden, beyond the Arctic Circle, lies Abisko National Park, a valley carved by ice and surrounded by mountains that hold snow most of the year. The landscape feels exposed and immense. Wind sweeps through the open plains, carrying snow across frozen lakes and birch forests that twist low against the cold. In winter, the sun barely rises. A faint glow lingers along the horizon while temperatures drop below freezing for months. The long night turns the sky into a stage for the aurora borealis, green and violet lights that move soundlessly above the valley. In summer, daylight never ends. rivers break free from ice, and wildflowers cover the slopes that only weeks before were white. A narrow canyon cuts through the park, where the Abisko River flows between walls of dark rock. Trails follow its edge, leading toward the mountains and the vast tundra beyond. North of Malmö, where the Lada River meets the Öresund, lies Lomma, a town of harbors, beaches, and wind. The coastline is flat and open, the sea stretching pale blue toward the Danish shore. Breakwaters extend into the water, and the sound of waves mixes with the call of gulls that circle above the piers. Boats lie moored in narrow channels that wind through reeds and sandbanks. Along the shore, the dunes shift with the wind, dotted with tufts of grass and driftwood. The beach runs wide and shallow, its color changing through the day, gray in morning mist, golden under evening light. Far north in Lapland, along the frozen Torn River, lies Jukkasjarvi, a small village surrounded by snow, light, and silence. In winter, the land turns white for months, the air dry and sharp, the sky glowing faintly with the low Arctic sun. The river lies frozen and still, its surface crossed by reindeer tracks and wind-blown snow. Here stands the Ice Hotel, rebuilt every year from blocks cut from the river's ice. Its walls shimmer with trapped air and light, corridors glowing blue in the half-dark. Inside, sculptures, beds, and arches melt slowly as the season turns. When spring arrives, the entire structure returns to water, flowing back into the Torn once more. Wooden houses line the village road, their smoke rising straight into the cold air. At night, the aurora moves above the roofs in green waves. Along Sweden's southwest coast lies Halland, a region shaped by the North Sea. The shoreline stretches in long curves of sand and stone, where dunes shift under constant wind. The sea is always close, its color changes with the weather, from gray and cold under low clouds to deep blue in the light of clear days. Rivers cut through the land on their way to the coast. They pass through forests and farmlands before widening into estuaries lined with reeds. Old mills and stone bridges still stand along the banks, reminders of when water powered entire villages. Inland, the terrain rises into wooded hills, scattered with lakes that mirror the sky. The coast remains the center of life. Fishing harbors open toward the sea, and weathered piers stretch into the waves. Gulls circle above the breakers, while wind carries the smell of salt and pine across the fields. In the far north of Lapland rises Kebnekaise, Sweden's highest mountain. Its twin summits stand above a range of sharp ridges and deep glacial valleys. The southern peak, covered in ice, changes height from year to year as the glacier melts and reforms. Around it, the air is thin and cold, the wind moving without shelter across snow and stone. The approach begins through low valleys where birch forests cling to the slopes. Rivers cut through the tundra, carrying meltwater from the glaciers. As the trail climbs higher, vegetation fades and the ground turns to bare rock. Above the last ridge, the snowfield opens wide, a white expanse tilted toward the sky. From the summit, the view reaches across miles of untouched land, frozen lakes, jagged peaks, and endless ridges that fade into Norway. Built on 14 islands where Lake Mälaren meets the Baltic Sea, Stockholm rises from water and rock. Bridges and channels weave the city together, reflecting towers, facades, and lights on the surface below. The skyline shifts constantly. Old spires of copper and stone standing beside glass towers that mirror the clouds. In the heart of the city lies Gamla Stan, a maze of narrow streets paved in worn stone. The walls glow warm in evening light, their colors deepening from yellow to red as the sun drops behind the rooftops. Beyond the old town, ferries and trams move between districts spread across islands and peninsulas. Parks and harbors open toward the water, where boats lie anchored among reeds and piers. The air carries a mix of salt and pine. From the ridges above Södermalm, the city appears like an archipelago of its own, islands of stone, steel, and light. Off Sweden's west coast, near the border with Norway, lies Kosterhavet, a landscape of sea, islands, and light. It is Sweden's first marine national park, protecting the waters around the coastal islands and the deep coastal trench that cuts through the seabed below. The current here is strong and cold, carrying life from the Atlantic into the Skagerrak. The water glows blue and green against bare rock. Smooth granite slopes fall directly into the sea, shaped by wind and ice. Between the islands, channels open into sheltered coves, where seaweed drifts beneath the surface. Beneath the waves, coral gardens and shellfish beds cover the seabed, home to hundreds of species found nowhere else in the country. On the islands, paths wind through meadows and low juniper. The air smells of salt and heather. Small harbors hold fishing boats that rise and fall with the tide, and lighthouses stand above the rocks, marking the boundary between land and open water. In the heart of southern Sweden lies Lake Vänern, a body of water so vast it blurs the sense of distance. From many shores, the opposite side is invisible. The lake feels like an inland sea contained by forest and rock. Waves roll against granite headlands, and the scent of pine drifts over the water. Hundreds of islands scatter across its surface. Some are no more than clusters of stone and trees. Others hold villages and harbors connected by narrow channels. The light shifts constantly. Gray mornings, blue afternoons, and long golden evenings when the lake seems endless. Rivers feed in from every direction, their mouths widening into marshes where reeds move in slow rhythm with the wind. Along the northern edge, cliffs fall directly into the water. To the south, farmland stretches down to open beaches. In the plains of southern Sweden lies Linköping, a city surrounded by farmland and intersected by the Smögen River. The landscape is open and level, stretching in wide fields that turn green in spring and gold by late summer. Roads and canals trace straight lines across the land, connecting farms, villages, and industrial parks that spread outward from the city. At its center rises the cathedral, its spire visible from far across the plain. Around it, narrow streets of stone and brick open into squares filled with markets and cafes. Beyond the old town, modern buildings of glass and steel mark the city's role in aviation and engineering. Aircraft hangars and research centers line the outskirts, blending into the fields that surround them. At the top of Sweden stretches Lapland, a land of tundra, mountains, and endless sky. Rivers wind through valleys carved by ice, and birch forests climb the slopes before giving way to bare stone and snow. The air is cold and dry, carrying the scent of pine and frost. In winter, the light fades to a few pale hours, and the landscape turns blue under the low sun. When darkness settles, the aurora moves silently above the ridges, green and violet waves shifting across the sky. The snow glows faintly in their light, and every sound seems distant, carried through the still air. In summer, the sun never sets. Days stretch into a single band of gold that circles the horizon, lighting rivers, plains, and distant peaks. Reindeer move across the tundra, following ancient routes between the forests and high plateaus. Wooden huts and Sami tents stand near the water, smoke rising in thin lines against the sky. On Sweden's southern coast, Karlskrona spreads across a chain of islands in the Baltic Sea. Founded in the 17th century as a naval base, the city was built from the water outward, streets and fortifications arranged with precision around sheltered harbors. The air smells of salt and tar, and the sound of gulls carries across the docks. Bridges and causeways connect the islands. From above, the layout forms a pattern of grids and channels, each island holding a piece of the city. Shipyards, churches, gardens, and barracks of pale stone. Wooden houses in yellow and red line the quays, their reflections shifting in the water between moored boats. Beyond the harbor lie the outer forts, built on low rocks facing the open sea. Lighthouses mark the channels, and ferries move between the islands in slow rhythm. In the center of northern Sweden stretches Jamtland, a region of mountains, forests, and long valleys filled with rivers and lakes. The land rolls in broad waves, rising slowly toward the high plateaus that mark the border with Norway. In summer, light lingers late across the hills, turning the air pale blue and gold. In winter, snow smooths every contour, and silence covers the forests. Rivers cut through the valleys, feeding wide lakes that mirror the sky. Villages stand far apart, their red wooden houses bright against the landscape. Roads wind through birch and pine, following the water between mountains that stay white long after spring reaches the plains. Reindeer move across the high ground, their tracks crossing rivers frozen solid in the cold months. Far out in the Baltic Sea lies Gotland, Sweden's largest island, a land of limestone cliffs, wind, and light. The sea surrounds it on all sides, turning from gray to green to deep blue as weather moves across the horizon. Waves strike against white rock, and the wind carries the scent of salt and grass across open fields. The island's shape is marked by erosion. Along the coast, tall sea stacks called raukar rise from the shore, pillars of stone left standing after the cliffs around them have been worn away. In some places, they form whole forests of rock, sculpted into arches and towers by centuries of waves and frost. Inland, the terrain softens into farmland and pine forest. Small churches stand in nearly every village, built from the same pale stone as the cliffs. On the western coast lies Visby, a walled town of narrow streets and towers that overlook the harbor. At the southern tip of Sweden lies Malmö, a city built on reclaimed land beside the Öresund Strait. The sea and the wind shape its edges. The horizon is wide and flat, with Denmark visible across the water. The Öresund Bridge stretches from the shoreline into the distance, its towers fading into mist as it crosses toward Copenhagen. The city blends old and new. Around Stortorget, streets of stone and brick surround the medieval church of St. Petri, while in Västra Hamnen, steel and glass rise where shipyards once stood. The turning torso twists above the waterfront, reflecting clouds and light from the sea. Between these districts, canals and walkways thread through parks lined with willows and reeds. Far above the Arctic Circle lies Kiruna, a city built on iron and surrounded by tundra. From the air, it appears as a pattern of streets and lights set against snow and rock. Beneath the surface runs one of the world's largest underground mines, descending through layers of ore and darkness. The ground itself is shifting, and the city is moving with it. Entire neighborhoods relocated to safer ground as the earth slowly subsides. The air here is cold and dry. In winter, daylight lasts only a few hours, and the snow glows blue in the half-light. At night, the aurora moves silently across the sky, turning the white landscape green and violet. In summer, the sun never sets. The light hovers above the horizon, washing the tundra in gold. Around the city rise low mountains and forests of birch and pine. North of Stockholm lies Uppsala, a city built along the Furius River, where the water divides the old town from the new. The current moves slowly through the center, passing beneath stone bridges and between rows of willows. Reflections of church towers and university buildings ripple on the surface, broken only by the movement of ducks and small boats. At the city's heart rises the cathedral, its twin spires visible for miles across the plain. Around it stand courtyards and halls of the old university, libraries, gardens, and observatories that have shaped centuries of study. Between them, narrow streets open into quiet squares where bicycles line the walls in ordered rows. Beyond the river, The newer districts stretch toward open fields. The land around Uppsala is flat and wide, marked by burial mounds that rise gently from the grass. East of Vänern lies Lake Vättern, long and narrow, stretching for more than 100 kilometers through the center of southern Sweden. The water is deep and clear, reflecting clouds that move quickly across the sky. From the cliffs above, the lake appears endless, a ribbon of blue pressed between ridges and forest. The shoreline changes constantly. In the north, steep slopes drop straight into the water. To the south, the land opens into bays and harbors, where towns and villages cluster along the edge. Linköping, at the lake's southern tip, rises where the water meets a wide valley. Its streets follow the curve of the shore. Winds shift without warning. In calm weather, the surface turns to glass. When storms come, waves crash against the rocks, as if from an ocean. Islands break the horizon here and there, their outlines dark against the pale water. Off Sweden's southeast coast, near Karlskrona, lies Sturko, an island of low cliffs, quiet fields, and shifting light. The shoreline curves in long arcs of stone and grass, where the Baltic rolls in with slow, steady waves. Granite outcrops rise above the water, polished smooth by wind and salt. Between them, small beaches open into coves filled with reeds and seaweed. Roads cross the island through open farmland, past red boathouses and windswept pines. From the higher ground, the sea is visible in every direction. A flat horizon, broken only by other islands scattered across the water. The air smells of salt and rain, and gulls move overhead in small circles. At the edge of Karlskrona's harbor lies Brandaholm, a narrow peninsula lined with small wooden cottages painted deep red. Each one faces the water, surrounded by gardens of flowers and fruit trees. White fences trace the paths between them, and flagpoles rise above the roofs, their flags moving gently in the sea wind. The land is small enough to walk end to end in minutes. From the tip, the harbor and islands stretch across the horizon. Boats moving between channels, their wakes breaking the reflection of the sky. The air smells of salt and grass, and the only sounds are waves against the stones and the creak of mooring lines in the wind. At the narrowest point of the Öresund Strait lies Helsingborg, a city built along steep cliffs in a restless sea. From the harbor, the coast of Denmark is visible across the water, only a few kilometers away. Ferries cross constantly between the two shores, their lights tracing lines over the waves. The city rises sharply from the waterfront. Streets climb the slope toward Karlskrona, the stone tower that remains from a medieval fortress once guarding the strait. Below it, the old town spreads in rows of red brick and cobblestone, while modern glass facades face the sea. The sound of ships mixes with the echo of footsteps on the narrow streets. To the north, long beaches stretch beyond the piers. Wind rolls in from the Kattegat, carrying the scent of salt and seaweed. At the tip of the Bjäre Peninsula in southern Sweden, the land rises suddenly into the Kullaberg Uplands, steep cliffs that plunge straight into the Kattegat. The rocks are dark and folded, twisted by pressure and time. Below them, the sea strikes against caves and narrow inlets, sending spray high into the wind. Paths follow the ridges through oak and beech forest, opening at times to sheer drops above the water. From the viewpoints, the horizon curves wide, the sea changing color with the clouds, gray one moment, deep blue the next. The air carries the smell of salt, seaweed, and wet stone. Hidden among the forests of central Sweden lies Busjon Lake, a small body of water enclosed by ridges and pine. The air here is still, the surface of the lake often so calm it mirrors the trees and clouds above without a ripple. Paths wind through moss and rock toward the shore, where reeds grow in clusters along the edge. In the mornings, mist drifts low across the water, turning the shoreline into shifting shapes of gray and green. The sound of birds carries over the surface, loons calling, wings cutting through the silence. In late summer, the forest reflects in deep blue water, and fallen leaves gather in the shallows. Along the Bohuslän coast, south of Fjällbacka, lies Valon Nature Reserve, a landscape of bare granite, scattered pines, and narrow inlets of sea. The rock is smooth and rounded, marked by cracks filled with moss and lichen. Between the cliffs, small bays open into calm water, their surfaces shifting with the tide. Paths follow the coast, crossing from forest to open rock and back again. The scent of salt and resin drifts through the air, and seabirds move low above the waves. In sheltered places, the sea lies perfectly still, reflecting clouds and stone. Out on the headlands, the wind is stronger, and the horizon stretches unbroken toward the outer islands. On Sweden's southeast coast, Oskarshamn stretches along the edge of the Baltic. its harbor cut deep into the granite shore. Cranes, piers, and ferries fill the waterfront, their outlines sharp against the open water. The air smells of salt and pine, and the wind carries the sound of engines and gulls across the docks. The town rises from the harbor in gentle terraces. Streets climb toward the hills, lined with wooden houses painted in shades of red, yellow, and white. Between them, glimpses of the sea appear at every turn. To the north, the coastline breaks into inlets and islands covered with forest. To the south, wide bays open toward the horizon. In western Dalarna, near the Norwegian border, the land rises into the broad plateau of Fullafjallet. The mountain is not sharp or jagged, but wide and open, a vast table of stone that stretches above the forests. The tree line marks the boundary where birch and pine give way to tundra, a windswept expanse of moss, lichen, and shallow pools. Here lies Jukkasjarvi, Sweden's highest waterfall. Water drops more than 90 meters from the plateau's edge, breaking into mist before reaching the canyon below. The cliffs around it glow red and brown in sunlight, streaked with layers carved by ice and erosion. The air near the falls is filled with spray, and even in summer, the water stays cold from the melting snow above. Across the plateau, weather shifts quickly. Fog rolls in without warning, covering the ground in white. In southeastern Sweden, Norrköping stands along the Motala River, where the water drops through a narrow valley before reaching the Baltic Sea. The river once powered the city's textile mills and paper factories. Today, it still runs between brick warehouses and chimneys that rise beside the flow. The sound of the current echoes through streets lined with canals, turbines, and bridges of steel. Old industrial buildings have been restored, their tall windows reflecting the water below. Offices, museums, and studios now fill the same halls that once held spinning machines. Stone walls and iron pipes remain part of the architecture, reminders of how the city grew around the river's energy. Beyond the industrial core, residential districts climb the surrounding hills. Parks follow the water's bends, and trams run through the center toward the harbor. Off Sweden's southeast coast lies Öland, a long, narrow island where the land feels stretched between sky and sea. The air is dry, the light sharp. Wind moves constantly across fields of grass and stone. From above, the island looks almost flat, a thin strip of limestone running parallel to the mainland. Much of the interior is taken by Stora Alvaret, a vast limestone plain that extends for kilometers. The soil is thin and hard, covered in low vegetation and scattered rocks. In spring, rare orchids bloom across the flat ground, coloring the gray with violet and white. Ancient walls of piled stone trace old boundaries through the open space. Along the coasts, windmills stand in rows, their wooden sails turned toward the horizon. Fishing villages cluster by the shore, and lighthouses mark the edges of the island. On Sweden's northern coast, where the forests of Norrland meet the Gulf of Bothnia, lies Sundsvall, a city built between two hills and facing the sea. The river Siljan runs through its center, passing under bridges and beside parks, before reaching the harbor. The air carries the smell of salt and resin, and the cry of gulls mixes with the hum of traffic and cranes. The old center, Stenston, the stone town, was rebuilt after a fire in the 19th century. Wide avenues line rows of stone buildings, carved with balconies and arches, their colors pale under northern light. Beyond the city, the land rises steeply. Pine forests cover the slopes, and from the high points, the sea stretches flat and silver to the horizon. On the eastern shore of Lake Vänern rises Kinnekulla, a flat-topped mountain of stone and forest. Its slopes climb gently from the plains, covered in birch, oak, and beech. From a distance, it looks like a single green wall. Up close, the ground reveals layers of limestone and shale stacked in bands from the ancient seabed. Streams cut narrow ravines through the plateau, their water running clear over moss and rock. In spring, wildflowers cover the meadows, and orchids bloom in the damp soil at the forest's edge. Small villages sit along the lower slopes, their roads winding upward toward old quarries and lookout towers near the summit. Along the Jota River, where the water drops in a series of falls and channels, lies Trollhättan, a city built on movement and power. For centuries, the river has shaped the land and the people who settled beside it. The roar of water echoes through the gorge, and mist rises where the current meets the rocks. The old locks still mark the route of the Jota Canal, their gates opening and closing as boats climb from one level to another. Around them stand red brick factories, turbines, and bridges, reminders of the industry that grew from the river's force. Above the gorge, walkways and trails lead through pine forest, following the edge where water and land meet in constant motion. In calm weather, the surface of the canal reflects the sky and the forest on both sides. When the floodgates open, the silence breaks, water rushing through concrete channels, filling the valley with sound. In the far north of Lapland, Sarek spreads across a maze of valleys, glaciers, and peaks. The mountains here rise sharply from deep ravines, their slopes covered with snow even in summer. Rivers twist through the valleys below, breaking into torrents that carve through stone and ice. Clouds often move low across the ridges, hiding summits that reach over 2,000 meters. There are no roads inside Sarek, no marked trails, no cabins. Only reindeer paths cross the tundra, and even those vanish beneath snow and moss. The land changes quickly. Storms sweep through the passes, fog fills the valleys, and rivers flood with meltwater. It is a landscape that resists comfort, demanding patience and endurance from anyone who enters. The Sami people have moved through this region for centuries, herding reindeer across the high plateaus. Their routes followed the same natural corridors that cut between the peaks. From the ridges, the view stretches across a wilderness without borders, a network of ice, rock, and water that feels untouched, vast, and silent. On Sweden's west coast, where the Gota River meets the North Sea, lies Gothenburg, a city built around docks, shipyards, and shifting light. The harbor stretches deep inland, lined with cranes that stand like silhouettes against the sky. Ferries and cargo ships move through the channels, their engines echoing against the warehouses along the quay. The old center follows canals built by Dutch engineers centuries ago. Narrow bridges cross calm water, and the facades of stone and brick reflect in the surface below. Beyond the harbor, broad avenues lead through parks and squares, where trams curve between rows of trees. The air carries a faint mix of salt, diesel, and rain. To the west, the city opens toward the sea. Small islands rise from the water beyond the piers, their rocks polished smooth by wind and waves. West of Örebro, the land begins to rise into the wooded hills of Kilsbergen. From the plains, the ridgeline appears dark and even, stretching north and south like a border drawn by the earth itself. Birch and pine cover the slopes, and between them run narrow streams that fall toward the lakes and marshes below. trails lead into deep valleys where moss covers stones and fallen trunks. The air is cool and damp, filled with the scent of soil and water. In places, the forest opens into clearings where wind stirs the grass and the sound of birds carries through the trees. Small lakes lie hidden among the ridges, their surfaces still and black beneath the pines. On Sweden's southeast coast, Kalmar stands between land and sea, built on islands linked by bridges and stone causeways. The city grew where trade routes met the Baltic, and its harbor still opens toward the waterway that leads to Åland. The air carries the sound of gulls and the slow rhythm of waves against the quays. At the center rises Kalmar Castle, its towers reflected in the surrounding moat. Beyond its walls, the old town spreads in narrow streets of cobblestone and plaster facades that fade from yellow to red in the afternoon light. The sea is never far. From almost any street, the horizon glimmers between buildings. Across the water, the long bridge to Åland stretches into the distance. Ferries move beneath it, their wakes cutting through the reflections of clouds. In the center of Sweden lies Örebro, a city built around the Svarten River, where it widens into a lake. The water runs through the middle of the city, crossed by low bridges and bordered by parks that fill with light in summer and mist in early autumn. Reflections of towers and trees ripple against the current as boats move slowly along the banks. At the heart of the city stands a stone castle, its round towers rising from the river itself. The walls mirror in the water, surrounded by old streets of cobblestone and timber. Beyond the center, the city spreads into neighborhoods of brick and concrete, broken by wide green spaces that open toward forests and fields. In the south of Sweden, among open fields and low hills, lies Lund, a city of cobblestone streets, stone walls, and long traditions. It grew from a medieval bishop's seat into a university town, where towers and trees share the same skyline. The air often carries the scent of rain and lilac from the gardens that fill its courtyards and squares. At the city's center stands the cathedral, built of gray sandstone nearly 9 centuries ago. Inside, the crypt's arches rest on carved columns, their stone worn smooth by time. Around it spreads the university, a network of halls, libraries, and paths shaded by chestnut trees. Cyclists move through the streets, and bells mark the passing hours across the rooftops. Sweden is vast, wild, and endlessly varied. Where islands scatter across quiet seas, forests stretch beyond the horizon, and northern lights move above mountains of snow and ice. If this journey through Sweden sparked your curiosity, hit subscribe. There are many more countries waiting to explore right here on the channel.